everybody in. Welcome, everyone. We'll give everybody a minute to hop in, and we will get started. Thank you all for being here today, and I will start by sharing my screen, and we will jump in. So, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. My name is Dr. Dustin Sachs. I am Chief Technologist and Senior Director of Programs here at the Cyber Risk Collaborative, and really excited to have everybody here today to talk about our topic and to introduce our two panelists today. And today, the presentation that we're giving is titled High Value Targets 2025 Toolkit for Executive Cyber Protection. And we're going to go beyond just executives in this conversation, but the real exciting thing is that we're releasing our next of our resource toolkits today, and really excited to share that with everybody as we move forward. So I think everybody here is, I see a lot of familiar names, but if you're not familiar with the Cyber Risk Collaborative or the Cyber Risk Collaborative Accelerator Program, um, Cyber Risk Collaborative is here to enable career development for current and future cyber leaders. We do all of our stuff through CISO developed tools, resources, and templates. So these are things that our members have asked for, our members have discussed, our members have contributed to. Um, so it truly is a peer collaboration and really very community driven. Um, we also provide the opportunity for you to expand your network, to have access to a global community of top security leaders, and have access to opportunities to network and interact with your peers. We have two different membership types. We have a complimentary general membership, and we have our premium membership, the CRC Plus or the Accelerator program, which gives you really unparalleled access to resources and benefits. And we're gonna talk about some of those here today. So, really excited again for this conversation. So today we will be releasing shortly after this webinar our next resource toolkit on executive cyber protection. There will be two guidance documents. We'll talk about some of the content that's in these guidance documents, as well as a couple of resources around threat modeling, and we'll talk about why the templates and the resources around threat modeling uh, really complement the items that are in the guidance documents. And even in our guidance documents, there is some really good templates of things to do, things you can use to implement to address the items we're going to talk about today. So, uh, again, very excited to share that. Will be our 22nd resource toolkit. We still have several coming through the end of the year, and several updates that will be made to existing toolkits as well. But without further ado, I'm really excited and honored to be able to introduce our panelists today. If you have not ever heard his name before, you've definitely heard the organization that he used to be the CISO at. Really excited to have Roland Cloutier here, who is the former CISO at TikTok. And of course, Jim McConnell, who is an executive protection professional and former leader of executive protection with a very well-known Fortune 25 company. And I'll give each of them kind of a few minutes to introduce themselves a little further and talk about, how they came into this topic and why this topic is really so important in this day and age. So, Roland, we'll start with you.
Hey, thanks, Dustin. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Actually, one of my favorite topics in general, the area of converged security. Um, I actually came from a converged background, meaning I didn't come out of information security network, technology professional. I came from anti-terrorism, law enforcement, military background, and found my way into cybersecurity, where I spent the rest of my career. But what was interesting is as I got into larger and larger organizations, chief security officer for EMC, chief security officer for ADP for a decade, with operations in over 83 countries, moved $13 trillion worth of money. You tend to have a lot of issues that pop up. And what I found was by applying some very specific capabilities and processes and programs, you can really reduce the threat against the entirety of your business resilience issues in the area of executive or key employee defense. And so by shifting our view as CISOs to a broader context in supporting threat against, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but just a different asset and how we approach that. I think we can really help our business in their efforts around business operations protection through defending the people that build the business and deliver it every day. So I'm excited to be here, especially with Jim, and I'm looking forward to a robust discussion.
Absolutely. And Jim, thank you for being here, and I'll give you a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Jim McConnell spent the last 30 years doing this thing called security. I don't know why people still think that converged security is new. It's been around for 40 years. So passionate about the topic also, and resources and capabilities. So 28 of those 30-ish years were with a large Fortune 25 company. And started in basic cyber kind of things, but it quickly moved across that converged security platform, and spent the last 5 years doing executive protection for that organization, domestically and around the world, for the key folks and large events. So not just executive protection, but a large event. So build out their PMO in that. So, wide variety of exposures. Very blessed to have that broad exposure. Love this topic because it's something that, as I say, from the church house to the White House, we have needs in this area, and for our executives or the folks that need to be protected differently. Then let's get some resources into your hands so that you can improve upon that, and ultimately be able to sell expansion of your capabilities into the executive suite better.
Absolutely. And again, it doesn't take a lot of thought to think of, incidents that we've had uh, recently that have impacted this topic, and made it a an important topic. So to start off with, and I think Roland, you and I talked about this a lot in the prep, but set a little bit of the context. We talk about it. We talk about executive protection, but I know one of the things we talked about is it really extends beyond, and you almost have to think of the kind of collateral damage that comes from just the executive, um, just thinking about it as executives. So can you set the stage of, when we talk about in the term you used assets, what are some of the assets we don't think about maybe when we approach this topic?
Yeah, it's great. Jim kind of already alluded to it a little bit, but it's this concept. When we talk about what we do as a living, which is business operations protection, how you ensure the sanctity of a business or an agency that you're working for and protecting, it's all about not just technology, but the people that run it. Yes, our executives more targeted, of course. They higher net worth, they have higher public view. They are seen as the people who are organizing your organization. Therefore, they need to be held accountable, so on and so forth. But in the context of how your business works, there are going to be key employees. There are going to be employees that sometimes that aren't key but are at risk because of their job within the business. And and at times, just Jim was talking about events. You may have a large amount of leaders and or group of organizations at events that you have to protect as well, because any single targeted event could result in a massive disastrous issue for you or for your business if, say, your entire sales force, your top sales leadership, or your top salespeople at President Club are gone, right? All those things are important. So we start to think about how we set up EEP programs or executive and employee and event protection programs. We have to understand the context that it is the individuals at a specific time, the threat associated against them, if any, and what level of appropriate protection do we provide for the resiliency of the organization. So that's kind of a broader context as I like to set it.
Absolutely. And I think, the other thing that sticks out in my mind is in some cases, depending on the profile of the actual person that you're looking at, the member of the organization, you may also be thinking about family members, children, spouses, other people that are living in their location, at their house or other things like that. Their neighbors, there's a lot of it can get very, very wide very quickly, but it's important to kind of keep that in mind depending on, the scenario. So Jim, um, you know, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but um, talk to, can you share a little bit about some of the different ways in which we see these attacks occurring, some of the vectors that we see? Because while many of them may be ones we're very familiar with, there are some that are, I'll say, more unique or more specific to this type of, threat that exists in our organizations.
Yeah, so I think that why would somebody go after these individuals? Because they reflect a brand. We know CEOs of some brands out there that if you say their name, you know the brand because of the person, versus you take other executive CEOs of companies, you're like, I don't know who Billy Bob is. I didn't know he was the CEO of such and such company. And so there's the brand of the individual and the importance of that individual to the brand. I think that there is the public perception of that individual that drives certain threats, and then how much they get around. And of course, people, adversaries want some screen time. And as we know, screen time is more now than just the Z&N truck showing up at the front door. It's now in a lot of different things we call media that the adversaries want screen time. So I think there's just, in the office, at their residence, at an event, at a casual family dinner that they just want to privacy and enjoy. There's just all these different areas. And I think the key there is, organizations, legal, the insurance team, the security teams, et cetera, really having a hard conversation with how do we start to define and scope this type of protection program. Roland said it well. It's somebody that has the word executive on their business card, but also key employees. The old thing of, who has the formula for Coca-Cola? Who's those important people? So some definitions and scope of who needs to be protected and how, et cetera. Because Mary, the reception at the front desk, her life it deserves the absolute protection that we need to provide to her. But Mary at the front desk has different threats than the executives because she is at the front door. So we're going to help her differently than the executive. And so the key here is making this into a program and something of a priority to look at this not in a casual once a year because we got to put it in the annual report conversation.
Absolutely. And, there's a question that came in that I think is really, really kind of appropriate right here, which is, we're talking here about high value targets as an entity that is, important to the organization. And we're talking about executives and maybe the people, the executive secretary and family members, what have you. But should we also be bucketing in this your key technical professionals? So, whoever's in charge of your backups maybe is somebody you want to protect in some way, because if you have a ransomware attack, or you could take out that person for lack of a better term, and now they're no longer, now you've lost something.
Yeah, I was working a tabletop exercise of a large organization in critical infrastructure, and I love the question from the CEO, and I use this in my training today. He said, "I have a question for everybody in the room," and he says, Give me the individual's name that has the most access to all of our systems?" And somebody said, "Here's Billy Bob," and they mentioned Billy Bob. So his point was, make Billy Bob go on a cruise, and how does that affect the exercise? But Dustin, it drives right into what you're saying. Billy Bob's back in the back corner back there, and we take care of him. But boy, the criticality of his, mindset, skill set, background, etc. Should we protect him differently than maybe others? And so it's one attribute to identify those people, but it was a great real life example of how they identified that a unique critical asset.
Yeah, and
And I'd like
you
to,
brought up
if
I'll go ahead, Roland. Sorry, please.
yeah, just to piggyback on it, I think it's important. I want to get back to the question for a second because I think HVT is a very specific type of individual when we talk about high value and the programs that we put persistent programs we put around those individuals on a continuing basis. I think those other individuals that are key employees that we have to adjust our monitoring for them internally and externally. We have to understand threat and context for them. We have to understand from a CISO perspective how much. I'm just going to stick with Jim's analogy here. Like, how much power is too much power for an individual to have, and should we adjust that? I think that goes under again this discussion on establishing an appropriate program to monitor for those things, normalize those things, and then decide what that risk is and bring them in and out of specific levels and types of protection rather than HVT. Because HVT is probably in the context of and Jim, love to hear your take on this, but from a normalized perspective, that is going to be a continuous totality of a wraparound defense for an individual like that goes beyond coming in and out based on known intelligence.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and Jim, I love what you brought up because I've had as somebody who has run tabletops for organizations before, the thing that always frustrated me the most was I would say to them, I'd go, okay, so when do you guys want to do this? They'd go, well, let me look at all the calendars and make sure we can get everybody in the room. And I go, nope, stop. Pick a date that works for, the organization that's not going to conflict with, the majority of people, but you don't need 100%. We don't want 100% of the people in the room. Like there's a reason not to have certain people in the room, and that's okay. If your head of HR is going to be on vacation, but that's the time that works for the majority of people, that's a perfect thing to throw into the scenario. Hey, your HR person's on vacation. What do you do? So we have this need for these tabletops. I think sometimes the thinking is we've got to have all the players in the room, and to some extent, yes, but largely you also there's also value in not having everybody in the room. So when we, and I'll start with you, Jim, and then we'll go to Roland. But for organizations that are sitting there going, okay, great, this is another thing I've got to add to my list of things I've got to do. I've already got a list of priorities that I've got to address. What are some of the things they can be doing, easily, quickly, walking away from this meeting, this gathering, and say, here are the things you could start doing that will just automatically start helping to address this issue.
So to me, it starts really with what does the organization. So I think there's two sides. One is um, if the thing that you can find out very quickly. What does the organization do outside of the four walls? Do they do sales events? Do they do sponsorships at the Super Bowl? Where do they get outside where employees are going? I don't care if it's an HOA, an HOA get together and we've got a booth out there. Where are those external, physically external events? And I'm not discounting the internal events that are inside of a building that are large employees, but just start with collecting, find, and ultimately, let me back up. Finding the, assigning to a human or a couple of humans, your job is to track and publish onto a secure SharePoint or whatever like that, all of our events. And so if we're doing a pop-up tent at an HOA, all the way to we're going to be sponsoring NASCAR, no matter where it is, let's start collecting those events. And of course, your maturity there gets into how do we analyze those? How do we get those on a map? Lots of things right there. So to me, that's the first thing is assigning somebody to start collecting those events. I think the second part is intel. And so intel, vulnerability type of stuff is who in the individual, because again, I want a human appointed to
Right.
this thing. If you don't have an intel function, physical intel or cyber intel, assign somebody. If you don't have that skill set, you got to outsource or something like that. So finding that person in intel, now we're going to link the events that are going on with that intel person. Boy, if you could start there, if you have nothing, you'll always mature that and other elements to it, but you got to start there. So to collect, kind of the size of the pie chart, as I said in my book, what's the size of the pie chart? And that's your number of events. And you start to collect those things. To me, start with that. And now we start to mature into how do we react to those things and start building protection.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Roland, anything that you think, that you would add?
Yeah, I'm going to take this from the probably the CISO side of the house perspective just for a second, because I think there's an important focus here that people are starting to be pulled in, or they're being asked, or they're trying to support a brother or sister organization within the company, and this is a very specific area. So I think first, what would help you is either you're helping your peers and partners define their services, or you're defining your services or what you're going to do in executive event and key employee protection. Whatever that they may be. It may be one or two, it may be five different things. We can talk about a couple of those. But one of the most important things Jim just brought up is threat intel linking. So if you have protection teams, so if you have an EP organization, they probably have an intel person, or they outsource it, and they're looking at typical things that you would think about tracking an individual, what information is available, who's searching on them, things like that. Typically in cyber, we have a wider perspective with a better capability in the deep and dark web, and so how do we marry those two things? How do we marry and link things like ingest brand monitoring out of our marketing organizations to have even a better complete picture? What's come in over some channels you may not see, and provide deeper context into that target individual that sent that message, the same way we would do with malware, right? Like provide the service by which you can help your peers or partners on the physical security side understand who that might be, what levels of sophistication they have. Man, they bounce that thing through, three anonymous platforms, and that last mile IP looks like it's coming from, the next town from where our CEO lives, or you know what, that's easy. We know that person's ID. We have their 6 social channels, and this guy blusters a lot. It gives the teams that are going to make those final decisions some really great information, intel, and capability that they didn't have before on the technical side when you merge those two functions in either your SOC, your Fusion Center, your Critical Incident Response Center. I think I want to stick on executive monitoring just for a second, because there's a bunch of great organizations out there that do it, 2 or 3 really great places that do a deeper level. And this gets back to Dustin's comment. It's not just about the executive, right? If my kid's playing on a PS5, and they're doing things out in the great world of talking to bad guys, and bad guys track my IP because I'm not using a VPN, and they're looking for anything coming from that VPN on, in the PS5 world. Find my kid, now they're integrated. Like, there are ways to really screw with people and their families. So how do we give them both is their name being attacked in any specific way, or being threatened, or being viewed, or people digging up information on them? but also technically are they at threat? So making sure that we're using the right organizations to do that for us on behalf of the executive or the key employee. And remember, a lot is about a 50% hit rate. Jim can answer this, and can probably chime in after, but a lot of people don't like to be monitored. They when they leave work, they want to leave work, and so does the CEO. They don't want protection. They don't want people looking at it. So often using an external entity supports them in doing that. They're they get the service, and we get notified if there's anything there. And the last thing I'll say is escalation process. The services integrating with existing teams, and then this escalation process. If you get intel that, what do you do? And then it becomes a threat. What's the next step, right? How do you validate the level of risk associated with that threat and the probability? And then how do you do protection planning against it? Same way we do it in cyber, those teams are going to be doing it on the EP side or the physical security side. So figure out a way to work your escalations together to get to planning faster and validate that threat and that risk.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
and
We've
my
gotten a
bad, I
couple
missed
of
it.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. We've gotten a couple of questions that I want to make sure, especially because I want to also have a little bit of time to talk through some of the resources that are going to be made available. But one of the questions that came in, and I was trying to avoid it because I didn't want to use the buzzword that's in there because it's one that I think we all kind of groan when we hear. But I think we have to address it. Is what Jim, and I know you and I were talking about this right before the call, but how does AI, how is it making protection of HVTs harder?
Sure. I think that, this kind of goes back to, I missed the first two steps. My bad is, what's the charter of this type of program? And has that been signed off by legal and stuff like that? And of course, the assets, that we're going to be protecting at different levels and how do that morph and stuff like that. And I think AI comes into play as a pro and a con. The pro side is we've got a lot of intel coming in. We've got a lot of information about different things that are going on or related to the individuals are going to be protected, the events are going to be protected. And so, how can we force multiply using AI to give us a perspective? As I always say, all of these tools are a perspective, not the perspective. And of course, the adversary on the other side is, and I'll use a certain job board right now that's going on, and I'm doing a lot of investigations around fraud in that job board and networking board. And are the adversaries using AI to make the direct messages that are going on highly, highly unique to the individual they are targeting? Absolutely. And so, pros and cons of that, I think really getting education around those pros and cons with a balance, it's a balance scale between them to show that it can be used for power, for the good, and power for the bad. And so, part of our cybersecurity awareness, part of our asset security awareness programs needs to start to add in those things into those. We can only afford a 15-minute security awareness program. Well, go to 16, 17, 20 minutes solely because of AI's pro and con.
Yeah, and and I think back, one of the things that's kind of sticking in my mind is also the ability and the ability to disseminate disinformation and misinformation using AI is also, I mean, I think back to um, some vitriol that several celebrities were tied to involving another celebrity where there was a video that came out after he said some very contentious things, and everybody was like, oh my god, why are these people getting involved, like it's this whole big thing. And it turns out the entire video was false. It looked spot on. Like you would not like you show it to two people and not and tell ask them if it's AI, they would have had no idea. So I think, and we've heard about, deepfakes and audio deepfakes and all of those things that are going on. So I think that those certainly play a role when it comes to AI. So, Roland, coming back to you for a moment, we had a question that came in, which is, you talk about leveraging third parties, but the question is, how and when do you start layering in those services? How do you determine that, hey, we need to, like, now is the time to get a um, third party to help us?
Yeah, so it depends on your services that you're committing to delivering. At the end of the day, do you have the capability to deliver them within your operating area? I mean, think about it. Maybe you just operate in domestic United States or in two states, or maybe you're a multinational and you're in Europe. You have people going to India all the time. You have JVs in China. You know, like you have to make a decision. What services are you going to deliver? Where are you going to deliver them to? And who's going to deliver them on your behalf? So when you set up a program like this, or almost any professionalized program, you want to be able to decide if you are going to be the deliverer of that, as in the organization you're going to outsource it. Then you create those contracts, have them deliver in the what we would call the theory of operation of execution, right? Like, so if anyone's going to Asia, this is the company delivering it for us. Same thing on the cyber side, right? If you don't have the capabilities in-house to do, have your analysts within your fusion center do deep dives on each of your protected entities, then you should outsource it, right? So if you're committing to doing it, you don't have the resource or the resource at the level of capability necessary to protect a human life, you go and ask someone else to do it for you. I think that's the easiest way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think the key there also is don't try to say, "Oh, we're only going to do it when we have big events," because that's it's a 24/7 thing. You know, as I tell people, the bad guys don't care that that it's 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and so so that ramp up of these programs, people should if you're going to do it all in, do it right, do it with excellence. Don't go, hey, I think, our busy time of the year is December. Why don't we just do this in December?
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think when we go back and talk about, high value targets versus key technical personnel, there's the difference, which is you might not need 24/7, oversight of your key technical personnel, but you certainly probably do for your high value, your HVTs. So I think that's a really valid, a really, really good point. So one of the other questions that came in, I think is a really good one and really addresses to some extent some of the guidance that's in the executive protection resource guide. And while you guys are talking through this, I'll kind of show on the screen what's included in this guidance document. But the question that came in is, how critical is it for you to have for organizations to have a robust security governance and control framework specifically for these individuals? Things like, should they be segmented from the rest of the organization? Should they have certain access and access governance controls that maybe others don't have in place, or policies,
I have
etc.?
a bit of a perspective on that. So I think we have to look at it a little bit differently than normally how we would do it in cyber risk, privacy, and digital enforcement. So I think what we have to say is why are they a target? What would be a target of them, and how do we apply controls, monitor those controls, and respond to those controls? So here's a for instance. If we know that a certain set of executives are going to get bezzed all the time, whaled, whatever, then we should ensure that we have in our monitoring playbooks, our store, whatever we're doing, we have a very specific playbook for that, right? Those I, Active Directory or whatever directory you're using, IDs should go in a very specific monitoring capability that has a higher level of sensitivity, that then when it goes and something triggers, that people know that is, those are key personnel that have a certain playbook that you're going to go to, and notification, support, response, and all of that stuff. So I think it's important to do that. With regards to policy enforcement oversight specific to individuals, no, I think that's done as part of the risk program. I think that's part of the planning of I have a key resource. And for instance, recently, I was supporting an organization where a subset of individuals were being targeted, both physically and digitally, and none of them were executives. And it was for a very specific thing the company was doing, but making sure that their machines, their identities, they sign for permission for phones. There's certain things that you're going to have to do, like, would you like us to put additional monitoring on your phone, digital defense monitoring on your phone? All of that stuff went in. And there was a joint playbook on escalation of when any of those individuals were targeted. But it wasn't part of policy, it was part of standards implementation on protective defense for the individual based on a joint set of policies of what we get to do or not to do, and standards that we apply to our services.
Yeah, and and as you bring that up, and then Jim, I will come. I definitely will come to you. One of the things that was really important to the members that were part of helping to put this guidance document together on executive protection, that was really echoes what you were just saying, Roland, which is it's not that you're adding or you're doing something wholly new. And if you look through, a lot of the things that are in here are, hey, integrate it with your existing incident response frameworks, integrate it with your existing email security. Now, one of the great things I think about this guidance document that's a little bit different from most of our other ones is there's some really good practical, like, hey, if you're trying to think of what are the different maybe keywords I should be thinking about, or how do I grep things, or how, what are some of the kind of things maybe I should be doing, back to the question about what steps, etc. This is a really great document, and something that I think our members that were involved in kind of collaborating on this came up with, that was really beneficial, and is certainly one that is practical. Talks about okay, again, different threat categories, different ways to just if you're not checking regularly, scanning, and putting these people into, specific buckets, and running, keywords against their corporate email to make sure you identify things, that's probably, back to the question of, what's one of the first things you could be doing. That's a really easy one, and one that you should be doing, because, we've seen too many of these incidents where, after they start doing the, investigation, they realize, oh, well, we had, 5, 6, 7 emails from the attacker, from the person, that show that they were disgruntled, that they were likely to do this, that we probably should have gotten law enforcement or somebody else involved, externally, or just applied better protection to this individual than we did. So, Jim, to your, from your perspective, how do you integrate um, these things, this executive protection, into your kind of regular operations?
Yeah, I'm going to go a little old school, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As you showed there, a pattern there. You've got everything from a statement that says looking for the word kill. Well, if I've got traffic going across the network through a DLP that picks up kill, I don't care whose name is on the end of that message. I'm going to go protect them. If
Right.
it's the janitor or Billy Bob or the CEO. So some things it doesn't matter. It's the same. It's a playbook kind of thing. And so kill for Billy Bob versus kill for the CEO. My response probably going to be about the same, type thing. Now let's take confidential data. So confidentiality of, say, GDS data, which is your travel data. On average, it's probably some level of classification within your organization. Okay, maybe for certain key assets and individuals, we have that travel data is highly confidential versus just confidential. So you may have some additional controls, but it's still data classification 101. It's just now you have a certain subset of that maybe is protected more than a regular subset. If we have metrics in our program, yeah, we're going to have metrics on protection. Well, maybe we have different metrics or stronger goals with those metrics when they relate to executive protection for our key assets individuals. In my metrics book, I have a metrics for information security, but I have a metrics for executive protection. Is there some overlap? Sure, because there's information about my key assets, key individuals that is more sensitive and more targeted than it is for regular employees. So there are absolutely some core same things, but let's just take advantage of things we already know.
Yeah.
These are higher value, and that can change over time. And we adjust our existing procedures, policies.
Yeah, so we're coming, we're coming up towards the back half of the webinar or the gathering that we're having today, and I want to talk about an area that as we talk about integrating with your kind of existing programs, the other part that the members really brought up that prompted some resources to be both shared and created, and that is the concept of using these threats as an opportunity to really do good threat modeling. So, Roland, how important is it, or how helpful is it to really do good in-depth threat modeling of these different scenarios, these different
It's super
things?
it's super important. So first of all, let's talk about what we're talking about. We're talking about human life. We're talking about men and women that have families, kids, husbands, wives, whatever. I mean, these are people. And so if we're going to give them a commitment that their lives are in our hands, or we're going to do our best to protect them in a way that's going to give them a better chance of whatever's going on, that we've got to do it right. And so threat modeling is a real thing. Unfortunately, we've been brought up in this concept of threat modeling's semi-static. There's a control. We go look at something. We follow a path. Blah blah blah. I mean, when you get into threat modeling, especially in these converged areas, it's it's a lot of things. I mean, what do physical security people, EP agents, really concern themselves about? Not just about someone coming in, rocking and rolling in the corporate headquarters, and finding their way up four sets of stairs to the CEO's office. It's knocking at their door at 6:30, 8 o'clock at night while they're having dinner. They go to open the door, and there's someone standing there that shouldn't be. I mean, these are real threat scenarios, right, that are happening every day.
Right.
So, um, combined threat modeling from issue or intel informational asset to downstream residual risk is really important in this. And so it's important to use professionals in here and join your information together, because what we might think is just a potential denial of service or taking over their video cameras, the professionals on the other side of the house are going to saying, oh crap, they're watching everything these people are doing. Or wow, they can automatically turn off all their lights at once at any time and not let them turn it on because they're running, IoT devices as their switches in their house. Like all these things work together. So threat modeling becomes comprehensively more important in these scenarios, meaning when it's for people, but we have to take a different approach and understand a different end result, of what we're looking at from a pure cyber perspective. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, and I think to your point, you might see, oh, CEO's, corporate phone got infected with malware, but what you're not thinking is, oh, that's also got, the tracking of, that's tracking that where they're at in the world at any given point, and now you've got, a GPS tracker of the, where that CEO is walking, they went down the street to go get a coffee kind of thing. So
And if I can just add to that, because that's been
please.
another huge problem. There was They don't even need to get into their phone anymore, because if
Right.
the individual has their phone, not set in a secure way that you might set your own phone, the things that leak off those applications, including location data and a bunch of things, are going to a third, fourth party provider who's putting that together, that I can go by to go track what I'm saying. I'm tracking a bad guy, but I could be tracking a good guy as well. And that's available today, as a commercial entity. So be careful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jim, anything that you would add,
Yeah.
around the threat modeling? And then I want to spend, 5 minutes or so just kind of walking through some of the things that are the members created and the members collaborated on around threat modeling before we kind of start to wrap up.
Yeah, TNT here. Training the threat modelers to add on these other elements, training the people that we're protecting, training our third parties, training in this. Because again, if I show um, uh, a threat modeling person that knows cyber very well, they may not understand the context from a physical life safety perspective. Same way on the physical side. Oh yeah, I've been a physical security guy. I'm a great threat analyst, etc. But that's those cyber people over there. And say, wait a minute, hold on. So maybe it's bringing those people together, taking those threat people through some tabletop exercises that combine the converged model going on here. So I got to add on training into this around across the board, updating our training for all these folks, updating our tabletops, et cetera, to start to include this more converged thinking that's going on. And threat modeling is one of those great things where maybe we need to add a column that says physical or cyber, yes or no, just to start to force people to think on in both concepts.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I know, was an area that our members really focused on, and that the group that worked on these resources focused on was around threat modeling. And, you know, the first thing was just establishing a common, like, what, a guide, there's so much good information out there about threat modeling, but it's very scattered. So some of it was just understanding that there's more than one methodology. We all think, oh, threat modeling is stride. Well, no, it could be other things, or oh, it's just octave, or it's just, the cyber kill chain. There are other threat models that are. The other thing is having a tool, having a resource, having something that can help you actually conduct your threat modeling. And that was where one of the resources for our that will be available in the member portal later today for our accelerator members is a threat modeling workbook, just a place to actually sit down and go through the process and document it and have all the things. What are the assumptions? What are the threats? You want to have those in a centralized place. You want to have those in a really good location available to you. Um, and even, having the other one that I know was talked about a lot by our members, and it's something that actually I know I worked on a lot at my last organization, was even just documenting your threat catalog. And this one was something that was created, and it was shared from a member, and it's focused around application, but you could very easily revamp something like this for and use this as a starting point for something much larger about around an individual, around a person, but identifying what are those different threats you might see against, instead of an application, against an actual person. Um, some of these may not apply, some of them will apply, but having that starting point is, I think, certainly important to have. So, how important, I guess, Jim and Roland, how important is it to kind of have and how hard or how much time would it take, if you said, oh, well, I'm going to create this all by myself, you know, what are the dangers of creating it by yourself, let's say? Oh, you're
I
up.
Yeah, I can take a start at Jim. I think first of all, if you're new at it and you don't understand the space, you're not a professional and you haven't done this for years, you're going to miss a lot of poo. You just are. I mean, at the end of the day. So, starting both from how to evaluate a threat to the specific information you're looking for, super important to utilize frameworks that your organization is comfortable with, that you're capable of, and add in specific professional information that have been developed. And whether it's someone like Jim that's been doing it for 30 years, or you hire a new employee that came out of the Secret Service after 10 years, but they have professional training. Whoever can apply that knowledge, I think, is can help you go a long way. And remember, these threat assessments are also going to be on-site assessments in a very different way. Meaning, if it's HVT, using that term from earlier, you might be assessing their home, the technology in their house, and that's a very different perspective than scanning for vulnerabilities in a cloud data center. So you're going to need someone to help you understand that and then apply it to an appropriate threat model to help you make those decisions.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
then of course the conversation is, not the same script and similar. It takes some, I think, some additional training on just interviewing folks. Imagine you're going to go interview the CEO's wife. That's a different conversation than even the CEO's executive assistant or the system administrator. So you showed application security, for example. Imagine me going and doing an application security assessment as part of a valid threat model for executive protection. Imagine that application is a travel management system.
Yeah.
I mean, big companies out there. I'm going to be calling up, certain large travel companies and saying, "Hey, I'm going to come do an application security assessment." Why? Y'all never done that before? Because we now have a new HVT program in our environment. So this is a mindset. This is a cultural mindset that says, if we're going to be serious about this, we're gonna rub some people very differently. So there's a lot of awareness. You talk about how long does this take? The awareness to start this and what it means and its seriousness of life safety is a serious subject, and that's not a one and done, very quick conversation. It's a deep, personal, human conversation that a lot of folks that have done threat assessments, particularly in the cyber side, haven't touched that human element, and that's okay. So you get the right people in the room.
Absolutely. So we're coming towards the end of our time. This has been great. Thank you all for those of you who have submitted questions. If you still have questions, please feel free to submit them. But thank you. As we start wrapping up, Roland, we'll start with you, Jim, and then we'll come to Roland. Is any kind of final thoughts, any sort of key takeaways you think the people who are either here live with us today or are watching this after the fact, um, key takeaways that they should have.
This is about human lives. Number one, this is converged security, protecting human lives. You got to charter it. You got to get the right people on board and buying into the need for this going forward. Don't reinvent the wheel in the way of policies and things like that you already have out there. Augment on top of those, and then have some ownership of who's going to own this, and that may be involving some folks that need to be dedicated individuals versus another part time of their thousand of the things they've got going on. And train, exercise, exercise.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roland.
And I would say this: if you're on the fence of whether you want to get involved or not, do it. It's important work. It's a to Jim's point, it's about people, and it's about your responsibility as a business operations protection leader. That crosses both areas. Might be uncomfortable, might be new. It's a great expansion point for you, and it's very doable. And you'll get great satisfaction when you help someone out. That's number one. Number two, apply your professionalism that you have and those type of capabilities in process engineering, thought leadership, risk management in a new way. Because a lot of times on the other side of the house, they don't have that breadth of experience you bring across such a global, environment, architecture, business systems. You can do some really great things and help them professionalize their organization. Or if it's not there, you get to lead it in a new way. And then last but not least, become a force multiplier. Start small, build, partner. So partner with your EP team if you have one, or partner with your marketing people to get good brand information. Decide and then grow into what your services are going to be, and then execute the same way that you do for the rest of your cyber defensive operations programs.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. As we kind of wrap up, just want to share, obviously, this session, as with all of our sessions here at the CyberRisk Collaborative, is eligible for one CPE credit. We use a self-reporting system, so but if you run into any issues, need any sort of documentation, please reach out to us. If you're interested in learning about and being able to get access to some of the tools that we've talked about today, please reach out to Tom Ward or myself. We'd be happy to talk with you about it. The guidance documents will be shared in our upcoming weekly member updates and in a couple of other areas that we'll share them. The tools, templates, resources that we've talked about today as well will be uploaded for those of you who have access to our members portal. You'll have those by the end of the day today. If you have questions, if you want to learn more, if you want to talk more about this, happy to broker those conversations as well. We're really excited about the next events that we've got coming up. As you exit today, you'll be presented with a brief 5-question survey. Just if you could take a minute or two to just answer them, it helps us make sure that we continue to provide these kind of high quality, high value resources and conversations to you. Again, Jim, Roland, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing everybody real soon. Our next community gathering will be on July 17th. It will be with Ross Young, and we're going to be talking about mentoring and coaching, both from the mentee side and the mentor side. So, great opportunity to bring your teams to the conversation, bring other people that you know, people who are up and coming, people who are looking to mentor, people who are looking to be mentees, etc. But it's going to be a really great conversation with Ross on July 17th. If we don't meet, if I don't speak to the people who have attended this in the next week, please, everybody, have a very happy, safe, healthy 4th of July holiday. And we will see you again real soon on our next community gathering. So thank you all very much for being here.